You're tuned into Auto Intelligence, live from Auto Trader, where data, tools, and your preferences sync to make your car shopping smooth.
They're searching inventory.
Oh, yeah.
They find what you need.
They're gonna find it.
You can make a budget for your wallet to help you succeed. Pricing's precise and true.
So true.
It's smarter car shopping.
Ooh.
Just for you.
Oh, it's just for you.
Ooh.
Find your next ride at autotrader.com. Powered by Auto Intelligence.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
At 4 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me, Steve Cates, Dr. Sky, for another exciting edition of the Dr. Sky Experience on your favorite radio station and mine, Talk Radio 77 WABC. As we like to say, and we certainly appreciate all you out there in Radio Land, no matter where you're listening to us, whether it's evening or early Sunday morning, of course, anywhere where this powerful signal reaches, you can email me at drsky@wabcradio.com. Our topics usually go to the realms, and we're proud of that, to astronomy, space, aviation, weather, celebrity guests, and stories of American exceptionalism, and lots of other newsworthy topics. Again, the contact number here, 1-800-848-9222. And you can, of course, go to wabcradio.com and redappleaudionetworks.com to listen not only to the Dr. Sky Experience podcast, but how about all those other great hosts that fill airtime here on the powerful station, Talk Radio 77 WABC. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our helmsman. To make this show possible, both Tony and Bill work very hard behind the scenes, and ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate them. Only hours away here in my home state of Arizona for the solemn memorial to Charlie Kirk. He talked about faith, family, freedom, love, and respect, and our hearts go out to him and, of course, his family, and may his tradition continue to live proudly, and I'm sure it will in many corners of the world and maybe out into the universe. We talk here on this radio show about many interesting topics. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like to email me, we do actually get some guest suggestions from the emails at drsky@wabcradio.com. Not a guarantee that we'll get every one that you recommend or put every one of those guests on the air, but to try to be somewhat fair and balanced, we do appreciate you, the radio listener out there. You know, it's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, something's going to happen in the New York metropolitan area this week. As the United Nations General Assembly meets, as many of you do know, no matter where you're listening to us, every year on various subjects. And one of them this particular time will be a whole week called Climate Week in New York City by the Climate Group, who states in their opinion no challenge is more important than changing the climate. According to a Reuters poll, some 86% of the world's population agrees that there should be international cooperation on climate change. Some of those goals are for zero carbon emissions by the year 2050. A frequent guest to this particular radio show is Tom Harris. He's the executive director of the International Climate Science Coalition, and a little more backstory on them. The International Climate Science Coalition is a nonpartisan group of independent scientists, economists, and energy and policy experts formed in 2008 to promote better understanding of climate science and policy worldwide. Their group aims to help create an environment in which a more rational, open discussion about climate issues emerges, thereby moving the debate away from implementation of costly and ineffective, quote, climate control measures. Their group encourages assisting vulnerable peoples to adapt to climate variability and continuing scientific research into the causes and impacts of climate change. Joining us from his near city up in Canada, Ottawa, Canada, where it's now some 44 degrees on the Fahrenheit scale. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure Tom Harris would agree there's no global warming in his neighborhood. And with that, we welcome Tom Harris to the Dr. Sky Experience. Tom, good morning to you. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. It's going down to 1 degree C just outside of the city by the time our interview's over.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Is that expected in the sense in September there? I mean, tell us.
Well, it's a bit early. It's a bit early because we got a frost warning because, of course, if it goes 1 degree colder, it'll be actually snow if it rained. But, so we got a frost warning for tonight. We're going down to 1 degree C.
Wow. I envy you, and I'm sure many people do.
Bring on global warming. Canadians would say thank you very much.
Well, absolutely. I'd trade you with some temperatures here in the triple digits still in the area of Arizona and Phoenix. But Tom, seriously, thank you for joining us again. And I would like to also mention to the audience, with your background, I didn't read much into it, but of course, many people, I'm sure you'll describe yourself in a bigger, more elaborate introduction. I'd like to, in maybe the second hour, talk about another subset of your experiences, and that goes to the world of the area of aviation. And I think the listeners of the Dr. Sky Experience will be happy to hear the great legacy of Canadian aviation. And I'm sure those stories will at least hopefully perk some interest. Because what do, Tom? We say this proudly. We try to open our minds, then the minds of many out there, on the many mysteries of things that go on. And to be fair and try to be balanced, I know other networks claim that that's their, mantra. We here on the Dr. Sky Experience, we're certainly not trying to force anybody to believe some of the things with the many guests we have. It's open to what? The First Amendment that we have here, and may freedom ring. But let's start to talk about a couple of news articles that you've just written here, and you're very proud of those. Describe them in the relationship of what's happening, and then let's talk a little bit more for those that are listening in the New York metro area, and of course people around the world. Something big is happening with Climate Week in the New York City area. Tell us about those articles.
Yeah, for sure. In AmericaOutloud.news, which is a very prominent site, I write for them every week, we have an article about how the climate justice movement, which is a major focus of the Climate Week New York City, has got the whole thing backwards. I mean, they think that, it's unjust. There's the perpetrators, the fossil fuel companies, and then there's the poor people who are suffering. The fact is, if we go with what the people in Climate Week New York City want, we would be more and more reliant on wind and solar power, which are so expensive that the poor people would be it'd be very hard for them to heat their homes. So climate justice would say that we should actually have the least expensive form of energy, which would be fossil fuels. So they have that backwards. Right. The other article I have, which is in a way more interesting, is in PJ Media. And that talks about the fact that here they are worried about global warming when many research studies have shown that it's cooling that is much more dangerous to humans. In fact, there have been a couple of studies that have been published in The Lancet, which is a British medical journal. One of them shows that 9 times as many people die from the cold than from the heat. Another one shows that 20 times as many people die from the cold than from the heat. And yet this climate change or Climate Week New York City is almost exclusively focused on the dangers of warming. And yet throughout human history, warming has been good for us. It's always been great. We had the medieval warm period, we had the Roman warm period, the Minoan warm period. It's during cold times when we had famine, when we had, more wars, we had much worse crop productivity. Warming is generally good. People retire to Florida. They don't retire to Alaska. I mean, they have the whole thing backwards. And it's funny because when I worked in the House of Commons, I went to represent my MP because I worked for the opposition environment critic. And there was a guy from the World Bank who was showing a map of the world in the year 2050 when global warming will have become a catastrophe. And I put up my hand, and I didn't realize that in these presentations, you're not supposed to ask politically incorrect questions. But I said, it looks like it'll be great for Canada. We'll be farming all the way up to James Bay, maybe even Hudson's Bay. And, of course, there was dead silence across the room because all the MPs looked and, warming would be a good thing for Canada.
Yes,
and
Tom.
yet here we're blaming ourselves for causing warming when in fact it's a good thing.
Well, Tom, people have heard this message, and I'm just, promoting it again, and obviously it's common sense. Why can't everybody out there within the sound not only of this powerful station, but in all forms of media, in all forms of public, discourse, why can't we not have, maybe I'm dreaming, a dialogue that's not necessarily a diatribe, a discourse, and we can have debates. And we like, of course, on this radio show, dialogue with critical thinking, but let me get to the point. Obviously, with the, assassination, the sad murder of Charlie Kirk, as I mentioned before, his memorial is just hours away near me here in this home state of Arizona. The interesting part about this is in part of your article, talks about the necessity to have disagreement without violence. And I mean, how does this ever become the part of human nature here? I mean, maybe I'm dreaming here to think, oh yeah, just because we're talking about this, people should be nice. But part of that article, describe more. We're talking about our freedom to be able to disagree with individuals. You go into this in a little deeper way. Please explain.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm a good example because, I was on Laura Ingram's show a couple of years ago, and she was asking me, how did you come over to climate realism? In other words, understanding what's really happening, not what the computer models say or what the media says or what the environmental groups say. And the way it happened was interesting. I actually wrote an article because my original field, and we're going to talk about this later, was aerospace. And I wrote an article about how exploring the planets, Mars and Venus, actually helps us understand things that apply to the Earth. And I used the example of the runaway greenhouse effect on Venus, because Venus is 95% atmosphere is carbon dioxide.
Totally.
And, that causes a huge greenhouse effect. And I said, this is going to happen on Earth if we're not careful. Well, a local professor who doesn't want me to use his name because, of course, we'll talk about this in a minute, but I mean, these scientists get as much as death threats, for speaking out. But anyway, he liked the article because comparative planetology is an interesting field for a geology professor. And so he used the article in his class, but he said, look, this business of Earth perhaps having a runaway greenhouse effect like Venus is just not possible. And he explained why. And of course, the main reason why is because we have oceans that absorb the carbon dioxide, and the bottom of the oceans, of course, are constantly the bottom of the oceans are being refreshed all the time. So it absorbs, the CO2 into the ocean floor, and then as carbonate, it actually gets taken into the Earth's mantle. But the bottom line is, he invited me to his lab to show me what the actual history of the Earth was through geologic time when CO2 was very high.
Yes.
And guess what? There was no correlation with temperature. In fact, it's interesting, the coldest period that they have in the geologic record, they can go back about 600 million years because they use the fossilized seashells. They grind them up and they analyze them for oxygen isotopes, and they can actually determine approximate temperatures over hundreds of millions of years. And the interesting thing, Dr. Sky, is that 440 million years ago was the coldest in the geologic record that we have. And at that time, carbon dioxide was 10 times higher than today. And I
want to talk about that, not to cut you short here, because in this time, but what I want to emphasize here is the human side of this. Let's say this. It seems like we don't learn from history, and that's an understatement because most people will go, yeah, we don't. In everything, wars and things like that. But let's talk more specifically about science. And in my realm, that I like to talk about, not an expert, but certainly try to bring this information to the table. Let's go back to the Dark Ages when we were forced to believe the Earth the center of the universe, and then radicals, in quotations, like Copernicus and Galileo, literally suffered, and other people were killed for the whole belief that there was intolerance to these beliefs. So what I'm saying today is, if you disagree with the climate stance, if you agree with the climate stance of what people are purporting on both sides, how do we ever get to a level where there's tolerance? Because I guess that's the lesson that I want to get out there into everybody. I'm not an instructor here, but it is a very sad thing. So let's fast forward to some solutions to that. What can we do in the world to have tolerance?
Yeah, well, one of the problems is that
what do we do?
If you're intolerant of alternative points of view, then you can never change your mind. Okay, you always have to defend your point of view to the death. And of course, it actually has been to the death in some cases. I mean, I changed my point of view because this professor brought me in and he showed me there was no correlation between CO2 and temperature. It just wasn't there. Yet you find scientists like Dr. Tim Ball, who I referenced in my letter to the Washington Times,
precisely,
who was very outspoken. He was an historical climatologist, okay, perfect person to be looking at the real history of the Earth. And he studied the Hudson's Bay Company records and, looking at the fur trade and all the records they used during the Little Ice Age, which is very cold, of course, in Canada. It's great for the fur industry. But regardless, he got 5 death threats because he was saying what his research found.
Yeah.
And Dr. Tad Murty, the same thing. He was a prominent oceanographer. I mean, he accompanied our prime minister to the Philippines after Hurricane Haiyan and was the expert. I mean, that's how high a level he was. And yet he got, because, he's East Indian ancestry, he's Canadian, he got racist death threats against his family.
That's insane. I mean, that's totally incredible. But here's the point again. I don't have the answer. If we're shows like this and other great shows out there, television, radio, print media, give us the chance, ladies and gentlemen, to have the conversation of how we can all sit down. If you don't agree with somebody, let's not pick up bricks, burn buildings down, do massive destruction and actually mass murder of people. But look at history.
Yeah.
But let's go back to something here. I want to mention this, Tom. Our special guest, ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to have him. Tom Harris, the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. In his opinion, of course, you'll be hearing for the next hour and a half. And we're proud to have him as a friend of the radio show. But more importantly, what could be more important than that? You, the listeners, 1-800-848-9222 to get in the conversation. Always the question would be asked, do you believe that this is hype, ladies and gentlemen, to climate science? Do you believe in the truth of it? And hopefully, right, Tom, we can have a civil conversation about this without, yelling and screaming at people. But maybe I'm asking for too much. I hope not, right?
I think there is a solution, and that is...
Let me hear it. Let me hear it.
Yeah, I think the solution is to try and separate your personal ego from your opinions about things like science. In other words, if you prove me wrong, it doesn't hurt me. It just basically proves that I'm mistaken in this particular thing. But people, they attach their ego to their ideas, and they'll fight to the death to not have to change their ideas. So, I mean, people have to separate. Look, this is science. It's not me. It's my opinion of science. And in fact, here's a thought that people probably don't understand, but it's worth learning, is that truth does not apply in science. Okay, science is merely people's opinion based on their interpretation of the observations they have. So you got 3 levels of interpretation there. It's their opinion. It's interesting because the whole question of truth was addressed by Plato. I mean, he said that truth is necessary. It's certain. It's in the bank. It's 100% true. It has to be true. And that would be the case for something like 2 + 2 = 4, or the queen moves in a certain way on the chessboard, because we write the rules. Okay, we write the rules of chess, but we don't write the rules of nature. We try to interpret them based on our opinion of the observational evidence that we have. And you might remember Francis Bacon in the 1500s, he talked about the idols of the mind, how everybody is influenced by their education, by their upbringing, by their personality, by their family. All those things go into changing the way they interpret what they observe. And, we've got to recognize that, what we think is true in science may be very wrong and may, in fact, be proven wrong in a year. And
well, let me go to your point, Tom, here. This is important for the listeners to hear. We won't go to it like a science class, I promise the audience. But of the main 5 extinctions that we've had on the Earth, I want to go more to your point with corroborating what you're talking about a massive cooling event. But by the way, ladies and gentlemen, of these 5 mass extinctions, and some believe we're in the 5th, in the 6th right now, the Ordovician. We're talking about 440 million years ago, a massive global cooling on the planet, but it recovered. Is that a reason to go out and put mercury and chemicals into the ocean? Pollute? Of course not. That would be insane. But as you move from Devonian, Permian, Triassic, the KT event, the asteroid of 65 million years ago, the point is, the Earth has gone through these cyclical changes, many caused by volcanic activity, asteroidal impact, blah, 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 down the line. A very important subject to talk about here. So where do you meet your most resistance to what you talk about, as opposed to me just simply asking, where do you meet most of the agreement Where do you meet most of the resistance? Tell me. I mean,
most of the resistance comes from people who have a vested interest. Okay, either because they're making money, there's huge money involved in the climate scare. They track what's called climate finance out of the Climate Policy Initiative out of San Francisco, and they're able to track $3 billion a day going into climate finance across the world. Now, it's probably 5 times that, but that's how much they actually track. And so there's groups that are making a massive profit, in the wind and solar industry, for example.
Yes, they are.
And they want the climate scare to continue indefinitely. And sadly, the nuclear industry, too, are making the huge mistake of saying, buy our reactors and help stop climate change. I mean, it's going to eventually collapse. The climate scare will collapse eventually, perhaps because we may end up cooling, and we can talk about that later. But the bottom line is that that's the number one driver, in my opinion, of the climate scare is money. And it even relates to media as well, because media want to sell their media because their advertisers want high circulation and headlines that are, we're headed towards catastrophe. I mean, this is a great headline to sell media, so they like that. The other thing is a lot of their advertisers, and I won't name the companies, but car companies and printing companies, they use the climate scare.
Well, it goes deeper than that, Tom.
product.
I mean, yes, we had a previous show that we did on the Dr. Sky Experience. Many people who listened, of course, did hear it, but if you didn't, we got into the discussion of vaccines with a very intelligent woman, not a medical doctor, who has a book out about all vaccinations and things of that sort. So obviously another very hot topic, but again, bringing to the table, ladies and gentlemen, the tolerance to disagree without violence. And that's not just in the world of climate science or in the world of vaccines. It should be the whole political side of the equation. Why can't the Republicans and the Democrats get along? But do I sound pretty naive to many listeners, I'm sure, because it's been throughout the history. So how do we change it? You've given us some ideas. Very interesting. Folks, if you're on the line waiting to get on the air, we promise our best effort to get you on the air, like Paul in Long Island and many others. 1-800-848-9222. The basic question I would ask the vast audience of Talk Radio 77 WABC. Do you say that it's a scam? Do you say that the whole climate science thing is nonsense? Or, on the other side, make your case in front of Tom Harris, not necessarily me. I describe myself as the humble host. And seriously, like an air traffic controller, right, Tom? My job is to make sure that all the flights get off the ground and safely get back without any collisions. But sometimes in the talk radio world, you do have collisions, and we welcome conversation. And that's what we talk about. So anyway, let's talk a little bit before we go to the break in a few minutes here, the hard break. We'll talk about this big event.
Can I add something? I wanted to point out that Benjamin Franklin, he was a wonderful man. He wanted to get away from the highly partisan warring kingdoms of Europe. And so he would bring what at the time were Democrats. The Republicans hadn't sort of been invented yet, but he'd bring in the two opposite parties and they'd sit under his mulberry tree. And, it's interesting because if you go on a tour of the congressional buildings in the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., you have this big mural of Ben Franklin sitting under his mulberry tree in his backyard with the left and the right, and they're trying to come up with something that is for the good of the country. And and he emphasized, we don't want polarized, opposition hating each other's guts. I mean, I find that the Democrats and the Republicans, I swear they hate each other more than they hate the terrorists.
Well, that's interesting. And on a lighter note, Tom, I just bring this to the audience, a little levity, in my mind. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, when asked the question, who's the president on the $100 U.S. currency, the $100 bill? Obviously, Benjamin Franklin was not a president, but there you go. How about that, Tom?
Yeah.
What'd I do?
Yeah, so we've lost our way. Okay, Ben Franklin would be very disappointed to see how polarized the United States has become, where the two left and right, they hate each other. And I mean, the bottom line is, I asked my dad before he died. He died at 95, actually. And he was an oddball. He was right-wing on some things, left-wing on others. And I said, Dad, I don't understand. Are you left-wing or right-wing? And he said, neither. I'm sensible. And what he meant is he didn't care whether it was right-wing or left-wing. He wasn't trying to follow a tribe.
Yeah, but I got a good one. Yeah, I got a good one.
He'd look at an issue and he'd basically decide if he agreed or disagreed. He didn't care if it was left or right.
Well, Tom, you're in the aerospace world, and I think somebody said this to us. I didn't create it. As an aircraft, it has two wings. It has a left wing and a right wing. And in order to get flight, like a bird, both wings have to cooperate, correct?
Perfect. That's a good analogy.
There you go. So, no, just talking a minute or two before... Tom, before we go to the break, I'm sorry to keep jumping in like this, but the clock I have to watch too. And it's important because that's what we do. But here we go. Just tell us briefly, if you can, in a minute and a half, we'll talk more about it. The whole Climate Week in New York, I looked at the roster of people coming. There's people from all over the world. I don't know how they're going to get all those people to speak at one time. And we even have our mayor, Kate Gallego of Phoenix, Arizona, joining this international group. Good, bad, or indifferent as far as the content, I have no idea. But tell us, what can people expect in 2 minutes from Tom Harris about the climate event, Climate Week in New York? What's going to happen?
Yeah. Climate Week New York City is put on by the Climate Group, and it's going to have up to 1,000 different events during the week all across New York City. They're bringing in, for example, the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. They're bringing in the Prime Minister of Bahamas. They're bringing in the president of Kenya. You know, they're bringing in all these people, and many of them are going to say that there's the end of the world. And, of course, the big driver of this is that the developing world wants $300 billion a year from the West. Okay, so that's going to be a big thing, and that's why they say climate justice, you know, pay for your sins, you Western nasty people. And the fact is, you're going to hear from a lot of third world countries who look on this as a massive gravy train.
And who knows, Tom, maybe the king of abracadabra might be there too, but we're not sure yet. We'll hear from you. And ladies and gentlemen, we take that hard break at the bottom of the hour, as you know, in terrestrial and, of course, radio like this, Talk Radio 77, heard everywhere. Hope your evening is going well, your morning is going well, as we move deeper into your weekend, talking about topics that we're hoping open up our minds to many mysteries, giving you the chance to give your opinion. We'll be right back with our special guest, Tom Harris, and ladies and gentlemen, you at 1-800-848-9222.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
A foolish faith in authority is the worst enemy of truth. A great statement by one of the most amazing scientists. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a quote from Albert Einstein. How appropriate. 32 minutes after the hour, our special guest, Tom Harris, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. He's joining us for the 2-hour Dr. Sky Experience. Tom, let's go to the phone lines. You're lighting it up, as I would imagine, and certainly appreciate you. Let's say good morning to Paul in Long Island. You've been patient, and how's your Sunday morning going? Your comments. You're on the air.
Well, it's going great because I'm listening to you guys. It's a great show. You've got a great guest and a great host. It makes for a great show.
Thank you.
I find it sort of fascinating when you get intelligent people who are in tune to what's going on. Climate control, all that stuff is all a left-wing, problematic cause to bring in more voters. Usually people are ill-informed, and they create a big movement with it. You could do that with practically anything, but they do bring in more voters that way, the left-wing, and they just beat the Republicans up on it because Republicans don't know how to fight back because they don't have the ability to do it really without question. They have no ability. People in this audience know that.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, Paul. You do. That Republicans maybe need to get a little more aggressive in their challenges when the Democrats, and again, I'm not trying to bash anybody here, and I'm not embarrassed to say what I feel. You're right. I mean, we need a little bit more solidarity like the Democrats seem to have when they propose and push their agenda, good or bad, right?
Exactly, and the Democrats have also found a way of importing more Democratic voters to the 65 Immigration Act. That rebuilt the Democratic Party into a total left-wing party, so you can bring up all these crazy ideas. The leftists will go along with it because anything that brings down America and puts them in power and control is going to be that way. You got a Michigan mayor who's in one of the towns is a Muslim. He's pushing all kinds of crazy names for streets. You got the lunatic running for mayor in New York City. The guy in Somalia, Minnesota, running for mayor is a Muslim. They're all products of the 65 Immigration Act. I hear people say, "Oh, just come here legally." No. You're a useful idiot if you say that because the Democratic Party, there is no comparison. They want guys dressing in women's locker rooms. Who in this audience who is a conservative or Republican wants anything like that? The difference is so great between the two that it's not even unbelievable. It's just going to become a numbers game. Who's going to win?
Yes, you're heard loudly.
They're bringing in millions of voters. You're
heard loudly, Paul. I want Tom to jump in on this because it's very exciting to listen to people's opinions and not talk over them, which we're not trying to do, nor are you. So, Tom, talk back.
Yeah, for sure.
Paul.
We have to look back and say to ourselves, how did the left take over our institutions? Because, of course, they run the show now. I mean, basically, with the exception of President Trump and the slight majority the Republicans have in Congress. Generally speaking, the left run our universities. They run our healthcare, our industry, our schools, everything. And how did they do it? Well, if you go back to the 70s when the conservatives were in charge, there was a book written by Saul Alinsky, who was a community organizer in New York, and it was called Rules for Radicals.
Exactly.
And basically, and he taught the left how to take over the institutions, because at that time, the left were on the outside looking in. And it's interesting because at that time, of course, they were very tolerant of alternative points of view and different lifestyles and stuff. Now that they're in charge, of course, they're completely intolerant. But the interesting thing is that they were brave, and they followed his rules quite well and eventually won out. We've become lazy, and I'm generally conservative, although I have some left-wing views. But generally speaking, the left were strong, and they worked hard, and they followed Alinsky's rules, and they were brave. They would go to events, and they'd stand up and object, that sort of thing. Conservatives over the decades have become quite lazy. I mean, we just simply haven't done what people like Charlie Kirk do. I mean, he's a real anomaly. So we have to take a page out of the left-wing book and actually look at how did they take over our society, and we've got to do the same thing.
Very well said. Paul, you get the last response on this, as the caller board is pretty powerful here with Tom's appearance here.
The last word makes your show great. Listen, the left will shut down anybody who disagrees with them. I proposed years ago, these are two big things I proposed: boycotting the left-wing media, every outlet, every newspaper, every TV, cable, everything that I wasn't listening to. I also said about gun control. You want to have a gun law? Okay. Anybody who commits a crime with a gun, mandatory 10 years sentence for using a gun in a crime. And the Republicans didn't listen to me. They wouldn't go forward with it. So I think the fix is in. It's just a numbers game. Democrats, listen, Kamala Harris got 75 million votes for letting in 25 million illegals, murderers, rapists into this country. And 80 million American people didn't vote, guys. Think about it. We're going to be outnumbered and we're going to lose. It's a numbers game.
Paul, I appreciate you, and thank you for giving us some dialogue with some critical thinking in there. That's a powerful bunch of information that both of us have listened to. So we appreciate you and hope you'll be part of our Dr. Sky experience for a long time to come. Let's move forward as we move through time and space, and let's say good morning to Deanna in Brooklyn. You're on with Tom Harris. How are you this Sunday morning? Good morning.
Well, good morning. You are a very smooth operator, and your guest is he's quite amazing with the highlights he's citing. I would like to just say that it has almost been it has truly been like the sword of Damocles hanging over me my whole time as being educated. It's like, global warming, and I'm so scared to take every little thing, and I recycle so diligently, they get you in this fear mode. I'm correct. Telling you, do you know that Al Gore said New York City was going to be underwater by 2024?
I heard that, yes.
Wow.
And so far you're not swimming, right, Deanna? You're not swimming that yet, thank God. Right.
No, sweetheart, no, but do you know that Fauci said, I am science? Now, these people are playing politics with our politics. All these politics. And people just go, I got to get COVID shot. I'm going to die. It's somehow they push our fear button, and then we just freeze,
Right.
Oh, yeah.
But I have witnessed this.
And that's a catalyst to violence, and a catalyst, look at that. You're right. It's like, if individuals don't have the depth perception that they really need, or they never knew how to do it, We're just simply trying to educate people to say, hey, like I said before, a foolish faith in authority is the worst enemy of truth.
Yeah.
So people need to go out and seek the truth, and don't let other people tell you, not just necessarily in authority, but even large corporations, let's say, about these agendas. Everybody without me pontificating. You're right, Deanna, in your way of saying it. You're not underwater yet. We're probably not going to have you swimming anytime soon. So read the science, check it, and verify, right?
Yeah, and don't be afraid.
Yes, and what about the whole thing about solar? Well, do you know how much farmland Hochul is going to seize in
it's
order
amazing.
to store the electricity or whatever they have to do? And how about the lithium-ion batteries?
Right. Diana, I couldn't believe this. I'm out here in Arizona. Deanna, I can't believe this. In one area in Arizona, I was driving on the freeway, and I couldn't believe what I saw. I saw this gigantic, maybe 20, 30, 40-acre parcel filled with these solar panels. And not to say that they're not doing anything good. That may, in Tom's opinion, Tom Harris's opinion, may not be the best effective way to generate electric power, but people need to know. So, Tom, let me not cut you off. And Deanna, thank you. You're giving us, again, some good dialogue with critical thinking behind it. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's not ready for prime time.
Well, we're all trying to get the word out. That's all. But, Tom, your response to Deanna before we move forward.
Yeah, sure. Deanna. Yeah, I love that name, Deanna. Fear is what they use to control you. Okay? That's what they're really trying to do. I mean, obviously money is a big driver behind the climate scare, but another one is control. Okay? If the government gets the public afraid enough, they're going to follow them and do whatever they say. So that's a major factor, is fear. And we saw that all through the COVID, pandemic era, where fear. I mean, that was being pushed so much. So people have to stop. Don't be afraid. And also don't be afraid to question what people are saying. The bottom line is that the climate scare, if you look into it just a little bit below the surface, you don't even have to know a lot. Yes. Look at how much has it warmed since 1880 generally across the world. It's 1.2 degrees Celsius. That is such a small amount in 145 years that you'd never notice it in your entire life. And yet they're saying in Climate Week New York City that climate change is the greatest threat to humanity. And you say, well, then humanity must be doing awfully well.
Right. And if you repeat something over and over, it becomes in the mind of many to be simple truth. But, Deanna, thank you. And I hope you're not going to be swimming underwater anytime soon. I doubt that very much. And we're certainly here to try to provide some sort of answers. Check out the science and obviously.
Thank you for your research and your insights. It's very refreshing.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and I hope you'll be with us for future editions of our Dr. Sky Experience.
Very much so.
Thank you. Have a good morning, Dan. Anyway, Tom, we're coming up on a break here in another minute or two. But, to extrapolate on what Deanna's been talking about and Michael, I mean, this is the positivity of open, clear thinking. I mean, and again, if you don't agree with this, ladies and gentlemen, make your best case in a way that you can provide us. It's not a debate stage. We're not here, right, Tom? We're not looking at debates where I'm the moderator and telling you got a minute, and you're overtime. Like you see the political debates, and by of course intention, everyone in a presidential or any kind of debate, they always go over their allotted time, and that's a tactic that, of course, anybody would use if they want to get their message out. But let's do it in a civil manner, I think.
Well, they're trying to discredit their opposition so people don't even think, they don't even hear them, and this business of demonizing people because they're disagreeing with each other, it's just totally destructive. And it prevents you from changing your mind. And I did change my mind, years ago on the climate issue. I used to think there was a climate emergency, but happily, this professor brought me in. I can't say his name because, it's too dangerous for them.
Because he's got the death threats against he and his family, right? And that's the whole point of the conversation, and I sound naive maybe. How do we all seem to get along in a world where you don't agree, I don't agree, meaning anybody out there, and have some sort of civil conversation with critical thinking? But hey, it's impossible sometimes, but maybe not. So that's what we're hoping we can change. Tom, we're almost at that break here, and obviously in the world of radio, people out there understand this. And ladies and gentlemen, still 1-800-848-9222. We go on into the hour number 2. as we still continue with our special guest. Proud to call him a friend of the show, Tom Harris, Executive Director, International Climate Science Coalition. And what is that website? Just give it out so people can go and check you out.
Okay, it's icsc-climate.com.
Okay, we appreciate that. More with Tom Harris. And ladies and gentlemen, if we haven't gotten you on the air by now, I do see the vast caller log. We will do our very best to give you a chance to be heard here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance. It is the illusion of knowledge. A quote from the late, great Stephen Hawking, two scientists that pretty much say it like it is, and we here on this particular archive, the Dr. Sky Experience, couldn't agree more. 48 minutes after the hour, our special guest, Tom Harris, Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. Let's say good morning to Sherwin, and the power of WABC reaches the volunteer state of Tennessee. Sherwin, you're on the air. How are you this morning?
I'm okay, sir. Sir, I got a trivial question I need asked. I'm 77 years old.
Yes, sir. Excuse me.
And I've been listening to oldies all my life. And the question I've got is this, sir.
Yes, sir.
I believe in 1964 or somewhere in the 60s, a song come out called Run, Baby, Run by the New Beats. I believe it's on the back of Jam Up, Jelly Tight.
Okay.
And that song, the last time I heard that song, I was 17 years old.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tell us more.
But if you can't find it, I like to hear Jam Up, Jelly Tight by the New Beat.
Okay. Well, I wish we were doing the WABC music portion of the radio show, but unless you have a question that deals with what we're talking about, maybe the word that you've just given us is a future song we can track down. Any question regarding the topic, Sherwin, as we move on?
What's that?
Well, Sherwin, thanks for the call. We appreciate you, sir. Let's continue to say good morning to Sandra in New Jersey. Good morning. You're on with Tom Harris, an interesting conversation.
Good morning to both of you, gentlemen. I was sleeping. I just woke up and I heard you talking, I believe, about, disagreeing in the workforce, disagreeing, and that's an okay thing.
Mm-hmm.
I hope, right? So I was thinking about the turning point in our country, the watershed moment, which way is this country going to go? And then just yesterday, RFK's home was threatened, with a bomb.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah. They have the canine dogs there. They have the law enforcement there. So I keep wondering which way is it going to go. I see a lot of good things with Charlie Kirk, all the beautiful things that are happening. But then I see this. So it's like the pendulum is swaying both ways. And I guess in time we're going to see which way is it going to go, the evildoer's way or the good way.
Well, I'm pretty confident, Sandra, and I want to be Mr. Positive on the radio show like Tom, that not just because of what we're trying to do, and the simple message, if you didn't hear it before, no fault of yours, is that we want to have open dialogue, and we hopefully find ways that we can all talk about subjects, whether our political differences are there. They shouldn't be, gone to the extremes of violence and all the things we're hearing about. But maybe, again, I sound naive to the way the world works, but I'm trying to be optimistic, Sandra. Tom, let's have some positivity from you, too, to Sandra. Let's give some good positivity here.
Yeah, I think we need to recognize that people on the other side of the political spectrum are not evil. Okay, they may be misguided. We may disagree with them. And I'll give you an example. One of my sisters is very left-wing. Okay, she's socialist. And her natural tendency would be to support the climate scare. But she was open-minded. She listened to the information I presented. And now she knows, as a left-winger, she knows the climate scare is ridiculous. Okay, she knows that it's wrong, it's bad for our country in so many ways. So I think we have to recognize that people on the other side of the spectrum may simply not know. They're not necessarily evil. You know, like Ben Franklin wanted people to open up and talk, and this is where Charlie Kirk did a really great job. I mean, he had Prove Me Wrong. He would encourage people to have open dialogue with both sides. And so I think that if we approach the people on the other side, not that they're wrong, but that we disagree with them, they have something to contribute, and together we can come to a better answer than either of us could by ourselves. So I think that what we need is a lot more respect for the other people that are in the debate, even people we vehemently disagree with. We have to be open-minded and let them say what they think is right.
You're right. And Sandra, that darkness needs to go away. But how do we do it, Sandra? I mean, have you experienced, may I ask personally, have you experienced some of this? If you go out and talk with other people, if your opinion differed than others, did they treat you with respect, or were you also a subject of this kind of insanity? Tell us, if you don't mind.
Well, thank God I'm always treated with respect when I have a difference of opinion, but I did get a text from my friend who happens to watch my cat a lot. She said some wild things about Donald Trump, and he's Hitler, and he's this, and he's that, and I didn't even want to answer, because I knew this is someone who is set in her ways, like your guest is saying, but sometimes, maybe at the right moment I might give her a book. I have many books on all these wonderful people who write books. I might offer her a book and say, check this out and see what you think, based on what she said. But I don't like to argue with people who think differently than me. But and I am open-minded, and I do like to hear them. But when I said evildoers, I didn't mean the average person. I meant the ones that are doing evil things, like someone maybe threatening RFK's home. And
that's horrible. Right, that's inexcusable. But Sandra, you know what? I have a suggestion. Remember when we were younger? I'll be 70, and I still feel pretty happy and healthy, but that's my thing. But here's the deal. Remember in some schools, right, Tom? We had here, I went to Catholic schools most of my life, whatever, but we had debate sessions in like the auditorium. And those were interesting because you got up there and you could have taken a topic. The teacher would have given a topic out, and they either volunteered or said to the student, go take this position or study it. They didn't force you. But we didn't have chairs thrown at people, right, Sandra? We didn't have death threats. If anything, they could boo you off the stage. But, hey, if you can't handle a little emotional, reaction like boos and hisses, that's different than violence. So not to be funny, let's hope we can all get along somehow.
Dr. Sky, I think we have to remember one thing. Why do most people on the left hate Donald Trump? Well, the reason is because they're hearing all these negative stories, some of them just made up, from the media. How many of them have met Donald Trump? How many of them have met Donald Trump personally? Okay, so when I hear people say, oh, he did this, he did that, I say, well, actually, CNN said that, and you're believing CNN. Now, we interviewed Larry... we interviewed
It's an
Larry
amazing
Bell.
Conversation. Sandra, you get the last word here. I hope we've been somewhat insightful and positive in the concerns that you might have, or the things you brought to the table. So you get the last word. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you for letting me speak. Like I said, I love everyone. I love to hear what they have to say, and if I can offer, a different idea to someone in a nice, peaceful way, I'm going to do it. But otherwise, I'm just going to, right now, because of the climate, I might not say anything, but I'm going to try in a nice way.
Well, Sandra, I wish I had a replicator machine for the way you talk and the way you're giving us this information. But Tom and I don't have that big machine. We could I don't know how many people are in Canada, but 350 million Americans? And obviously, if we could move toward that, being a little facetious. But, Sandra, thanks. I hope we're being a little bit informative and somewhat hopeful here. And we appreciate you being on our program. Have a good morning.
Can I tell you something interesting about Donald Trump? We interviewed a professor of space architecture, actually, at the University of Houston. His name's Larry Bell, and his interview is actually going to be on America Out Loud tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And he met Donald Trump a number of times personally at social events, and he said that he was a charming person, that he was a wonderful guy to deal with. And so it suddenly struck me, well, how many of the people that hate Donald Trump have actually met him? Or
for that matter, Tom, for that matter,
relying on left-wing
anybody
media
that they
completely.
haven't met, right? Anybody that you haven't met, if you're hearing information third, fourth, what's that old little game, the 7-Up thing? You start to do around the room and you say something, and by the time it gets back around the room of 20, 30 people, it's a totally different story than what it started out in the very beginning. So obviously, look, not to pontificate here, and that's certainly not what I'm trying to do, is bring the conversation to an open conversation, an open form of a dialogue in the whole subject of the climate crisis, the climate change, all the different subject matters that are going on here, and we appreciate you. And folks, if we haven't gotten you yet on the line, I don't know if there's an Alexis out there in Queens, still a Pete in Lakewood, and anybody else that has concerns about this particular topic, and then we'll kind of diverge a little bit and divulge information from Tom's background on another fascinating subject that's near and dear to me in the Dr. Sky realm as an aviation part of his life, but we'll carry on with the climate story because this is a very important subject. And I didn't quite understand, I don't know if you heard him, but Tom, we had Sherwin calling in from Tennessee. He might have thought this was a different radio show. Did you understand what he was asking? He was wanting us to find a piece of music, I thought, or something like that. God bless.
Yeah, maybe his son wrote the music or something, and he was promoting on national radio.
You're right. We don't need to cut the guy short, but couldn't quite fit it in unless there was more specificity to the topic. 1-800, ladies and gentlemen, 848-9222. And Tom, give out your website again so people can check you out and see the vast bit of information to make up their minds.
Yeah, sure. It's ICSC. That's for International Climate Science Coalition. So it's ICSC-climate.com.
Interesting stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move to the top of the hour. We promise a Sky update because that's exactly how this radio show started a very long time ago, giving you information as you hear the opening act, talking about always keep your eyes to the skies. We've got some things for your weekend that I think will enliven you and keep you out there in the best of informative information. We'll be right back on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And 3 minutes after the hour, we continue proudly with hour number 2 of the Dr. Sky Experience, right here on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Where else, ladies and gentlemen? If you have an email you'd like to send me, it's simple. It's just DRSKY, Dr. Sky at WABCRadio.com. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to listen to a repeat of not only this particular podcast and all the Dr. Sky archival information, simply go to two sources, WABCRadio.com, their podcast section, and let's not forget RedAppleAudioNetworks.com. And again, a special thanks to our helmsman. We consider this to be like a big celestial powerhouse, a big ship, as we move out here, past the nation, around the world, and out to the cosmos. A thank you, a sincere one, to Tony and Bill, navigating with their fingers on the power of 77 WABC. As we move into hour number 2, Tom Harris, the Executive Director of the International Climate Science Coalition. He is with us, ladies and gentlemen, for the hour number 2. And we're talking, ladies and gentlemen, about what you might have as an opinion about what's going on in the so-called climate crisis world. Are you a believer, a denier? But all we ask is bring some, critical thinking to the conversation. We're here not to convince you, but we're here to open your mind, and we do appreciate that. So let's continue with the callers here. If you've been on the line for so long, let's welcome Michael in Toms River. Michael, welcome to the Dr. Sky Experience. Thanks for your patience.
Hello, Dr. Sky. Thank you for letting me get on the air. It's a pleasure to speak to you. I'm a long-time listener and a first-time caller to your show.
Thank you, sir.
And I'm not a leftist, but I do believe that mankind is partially responsible for global warming. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'm not left-wing. Mm-hmm. But, okay. I believe that the polar ice cap is melting, and it's affecting polar bears. It's melting rapidly, and high temperatures are rising more rapidly in the last 20 years. Our glaciers are melting, and, I'm a first-time caller on your show, but I did call last week to Lionel to talk about this, but I was kind of embarrassed, like I was treated by a nutcase. But I forgot to say mankind is partially responsible for this. And I have a grandchild. I'm worried about her future.
Oh, sure.
And the evidence that your guest, Tom Harris, reveals is very credible. And I think he said that the global temperatures have risen only 1 degree in like the past 100 years. But if you go back 100 years ago, the temperatures were, much colder. So, one last thing I want to say,
okay, go ahead.
And my question is, the power companies, all the utilities are investing billions of dollars in renewable energy. And why would they do that if their scientists did not believe that global warming caused partially by mankind is real?
Yeah, you're bringing up, Michael, some good opinions and some good comments. Let Tom Harris, of course, respond back here. And Tom, this is an excellent, excellent caller to bring up some subjects from your side to clarify what he's asking about, in your opinion.
Yeah, for sure. And what he's saying is completely true. Humans do contribute to some extent to the warming that's occurred since the end of the Little Ice Age. The question is, how much are we causing, and is it going to be a problem in the future? I mean, so far, 1.2 degree warming has been good. It's pulled us out of the Little Ice Age, and we've seen a massive increase in crop productivity and vegetation density across the world. NASA has a map that shows the increase in leaf area all over the world. So the real question, though, is not, are we contributing, or are we perhaps the sole cause? I mean, even if we caused all of the 1.2 degrees warming, I would still say, so what? Because 1.2 degrees has not been a problem. So the real question is, in the future, are we going to see warming that is so dangerous that it's worth restructuring our entire society to try to stop? If it's another 1 degree warming over the next century, that's really not significant. It's not worth, spending trillions of dollars, turning our entire society upside down, changing all of our energy infrastructure. And in fact, the interesting thing is that people like Will Happer from Princeton University, he's a very leading expert in this field. He shows that if we had a doubling of carbon dioxide from our current 420 to 840 parts per million, at very most, we would see a 1 degree temperature rise. So the real question is what we're going to have happen in the future so dangerous that it's worth spending trillions of dollars and totally upending our society? Because what has happened so far has not been at all dangerous. In fact, it's been a very good thing that we've warmed, because if you go back to the Little Ice Age before 1880, before 1850, things were very bad. I mean, it was cold. It was cold. And of course, the crop productivity was down and everything else. I mean, you look through human history, you find that it's warm periods that are good. So Michael's points were right. I mean, everything he said is correct.
Well, Michael, you get the last word, because we got a ton of callers here, and we hate to cut anybody short. That's why we're doing the show. So your response back, and then we have to move forward. Again, I appreciate you and your position.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sky. I appreciate you letting me get through. But I think the utility companies are doing a great job in reducing the heat going into the atmosphere. But the biggest offender is not us, but China, because they're burning billions of tons of coal.
You're right. You are so right, Michael, and I appreciate you. Thank you, and I hope you will continue to be part of our Dr. Sky experience to make the conversation flow. You have a good morning. Thank you. Let's go to Alexi in Queens. Alexi, you're a regular caller here. You're on with Tom Harris. How are you this morning?
Yes, good morning to both of you. I hear this thing, climate change. This is all part of the 60s and 70s. If you go back, you have a movie, Soylent Green.
Yeah, I remember.
2022, and the atmosphere has gone completely mad, and the oceans are near death, and people are eating people because they cannot grow crops.
What a movie.
This is the same terroristic aspect of what they are doing today, telling you, 12 years, the half America will be underwater. But you know what is shocking about this whole thing? What they are doing is they are terrorizing a first world country like United States and some others into paying off for their sins. It is like the white guilt issue, you are affluent, mostly this or that. You have to pay these countries off because they are suffering because of your pollution. Meanwhile, like you said a moment ago, the Chinese are burning hundreds of millions of tons.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, Alexei. And, that's something that we don't hear about, but Tom, I'm sure, has more conceptual stuff and factual stuff on it. So talk about that for a minute from what Alexei's brought up to here this morning.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, if people did think that carbon dioxide rise was a worry, that we actually had to reduce it, and I certainly don't think we do, because the amount of extra warming is trivial, and the increase in CO2 will cause even greater crop productivity and more forests and that sort of thing. But if they thought CO2 was a problem, then they should look at the biggest emitter. And the biggest emitter by far is China. China is putting out twice as much carbon dioxide as the United States. And in fact, by 2030, when China is supposed to cap their emissions, according to the Paris Agreement, they will be putting out 3 times as much as the United States. However, China is boosting their coal production like crazy. I mean, since 2000, their consumption of coal for the production of electricity has gone up by 5 times. Okay,
so you could say they could give a damn then about the whole concept because they're laughing in the face of the rest of the world then, right, and doing it.
Right.
And how do you stop that? Right. Wouldn't it be good for Climate Week, Alexei, and to Tom, that somebody got up on the stage and said, hey, look, if we're bringing about the awareness of climate change in that quoted, the statement, how then can we get China, which with all the facts that you're bringing here, this is not just a, allegation, right, Tom? This is fact.
Oh, yeah.
And what Alexei's bringing up. How do you get these people to be held accountable and make them do the right thing so that we can have what we call a more harmonious world and maybe all get along somehow with this climate conference?
Well, right. And in fact, you have to look at, people are saying, well, by 2030, China's going to have to cap their emissions. But that's not true, because underlying the Paris Agreement is another agreement, which is the foundation of all UN climate stuff. And that is called the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And it says that developing countries, and they still call China a developing country, which is pretty ridiculous, but they do. They have as their first and overriding priority poverty alleviation and development, which of course means they want to use their cheapest form of electricity, which is coal. So they will not only triple, quadruple, they will go through the roof with CO2 emissions. And yet people are afraid to say to China, look, if you're serious about this,
I'm not afraid to say it. Right. You bet.
Yeah,
and I don't think Alexei's afraid to say it. But Alexei, you get the last word. We got to move forward here. Go ahead, Alexei.
Yeah, China have a great deal on the whole list.
Alexei, go ahead.
The whole issue, in short, is very simple. These fanatics for climate change, there are too many of them, and they don't know what they're doing. But the shocking thing is the alternatives that they supply in lieu of pollution. These windmills that are killing marine life like crazy, and these 50,000 acre or 100,000 acre solar farms, they don't produce enough electricity for a small community.
Absolutely, Alexei. You said it better than I've heard it in a long time, because you're right. Look at the land volume that it takes up, right? Look at all in other words, the diminished amounts of sunlight. How are you going to generate the power that you need consistently? Not that it's not a good alternative. Look, I have friends that have big RVs. I had a big RV, and I had a nice solar panel. But for me, that wasn't my primary source of driving down the road and charging my batteries. Alexei, you say it well. Final comment, and then we got to move.
The interesting thing is when you approach them for any credible, hard, basic scientific evidence, they say, well, the Earth is suddenly going through a horrible change because of pollution. Since 4 billion years, the surface of this planet has been in chaos, meteorological, environmental changes that will blow your mind.
I hear you. Alexei, thank you. Always nice to hear what you have to say, and appreciate your time with us on the Dr. Sky Experience. Here's a man, if he's still around. Pete in Lakewood, you've waited a long time. Your comment and questions?
I'm here. Have you
Go
heard
ahead, sir.
about the book, Inconvenient Facts, a fellow Canadian officer?
I'm sorry, sir. Say that again. I did not hear you.
I called you before about Inconvenient Facts, FACTX or FACX. Have you found that book?
I have not. Let Tom go ahead. Tom, go
I have
ahead.
another question as well.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a good book, by the way.
Oh, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Can you tell me the author so I can find it?
Oh, it's Gregory Wrightstone, WRIGHT, Wrightstone, and he's with the CO2 Coalition, and he's written that book, Inconvenient Facts. It's a wonderful book. He's written another book also more recently, so you should look up Gregory Wrightstone on Amazon, and you'll find all of his books.
Yeah, sorry, Pete, I couldn't hear you.
I have another question. Gregory Wrightstone. Okay, I'll remember that. I have a. How do you spell? Okay, Gregory Wrightstone. I have another
it's
question.
WRIGHT.
What happened in I want to know. Do you know what happened in 1776 and 1787? There were two volcanoes that erupted in Europe. They blocked out the crops. They blocked out the sun, and that caused a famine. That helped us win the Civil Revolutionary War.
Interesting. Yeah, never heard it that way, but that's interesting.
Yeah, now, that's the same thing that happened when Donald Trump was nominated for, he had 4 nominations for Nobel Peace Prize in his first term. He's only got 3 nominations already. He'll never win one because the Nobel Peace Prize is mostly run by leftists, so he'll never get it. He'll never win one.
I hear you.
Now, I have another question.
Go ahead.
He's hitting Maduro as these idiot Democrats, and they're defending criminals. Since he's never going to get it, I want him to break China. I want him to bankrupt China. So that way Margaret Thatcher, he's the only one that's still alive. He was born a year before I was. I'm 78 years old. About last night, I have never taken a flu shot. I never will. I took 2 Gova shots, and I never will.
I hear you.
Take more.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I might. Let's say I'll take the answer off. I'll take your answer off the air.
No, Pete, thank you for calling. I mean, I didn't understand what you were saying, but I think we got the message loud and clear. Tom, this is an interesting caller here because he has a lot of good points here, and it goes back to our conversation about what China is doing here. And I've read reports, maybe people smarter than me in the world of the political side. The Confucius Institute is embedded into a lot of colleges, I hear, not only here in America, but maybe in Canada.
Oh,
and could
totally,
it not be, right, that is part and parcel of what they're training people in the schools to say, look, we are doing everything we can to slow down and abate the climate crisis. But the truth of the matter is, you brought to the table evidence. Other people like Pete and, Sandra in New Jersey and all these other folks have gotten some good, solid things. So this is interesting. More about China. Give us a little more insight into what's really going on over there and how the hell do you stop this if there's people all in New York celebrating and looking for ways to stop the climate, incursion and all the problematic things. What the heck do we need to do to curtail China? How do you stop that?
I think you have to realize that the climate scare is a piggy bank for the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, it is a wonderful, wonderful thing for them because they are providing all this green energy. They call it green energy, but it really isn't because in many cases the power source they use to make it, whether it's wind or solar, is coal. I mean, they're using coal to make the wind turbines, etc. But China is the greatest beneficiary of the climate scare because they sell to us all this green energy, which isn't green, and they continue to grow their own coal supply, their own coal use for electricity. They're building coal stations all over the world.
Sure.
And you'd laugh, Dr. Sky, in Peru at the COP24, which is the Conference of the Parties of the UN Climate Agreement, they asked the Chinese negotiator whether they would consider changing the part of the UN climate conference that gives them an out clause to allow them to basically put out as much CO2 as they want forever. And you know what he said? Because they were negotiating the Paris Agreement at that time. He said the purpose of the Paris Agreement is to enforce the Framework Convention, not to change it. So the bottom line is that China has a sweetheart deal. They can sell us all of the wind and solar that we want to buy, but they're still booming with coal.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the point. Look, if this is, and I'm not doubting your word, people do the research, do your own research. And, you know, I don't like the term low information voter. I mean, that's kind of insulting, but let's be realistic here. Anybody who'd go to a polling place and not know more about the details like we're trying to bring, not that we're the only ones who do this. That's the whole part and parcel of the whole conversation. Do your research, continue to believe in what you believe in, and don't let the regular mainstream, lamestream, or whatever they call it, legacy media, give you these, little tiny sound bites where now all of a sudden you heard it on a show and now you believe that it's true, just like you were saying about the President of the United States. If you don't like him and you hate him, what do you really know is fact from fiction? And it goes with anybody. You could have the opposition side, you know, whether it's Democrat or Republican, unless you really do the research. But what is it, Tom? Is it people are lazy? I don't know. I don't want to accuse people of being lazy. Why don't we have the depth that we're trying to do here in everyday life? Maybe I sound too much like we're in a classroom.
Yeah, I think it starts in the classroom, quite frankly. I went to a parent-teacher night about 10 years ago for one of my girls' high school courses, biology teacher, and we sat all in the students' chairs, you know, and we asked the teacher questions, and I said, are you teaching both sides of the climate issue? And she was horrified. The biology teacher said, no, we would never touch any of that denier stuff. And that's where the climate scare starts. The kids are being inculcated with this climate alarmist stuff from Al Gore and from David Suzuki and the UN, and they're not even allowed to consider alternative points of view. I had a friend move from Egypt, and he brought his family here, and his 18-year-old son, he said, what should I do? I'm going to school, and I'm hearing all this climate stuff, and I know it's not true. Should I actually object? What should I do? And I said, well, you better be careful because this is politically sensitive and the teacher could fail you. So, you know, keep your opinions to yourself unless you really, really know what you're talking about. So, I mean, that's where it starts. The universities especially, but also the high schools have been taken over by people who will not tolerate alternative points of view in the
Okay, I got one for you, Tom. I got one for the audience here. If we had a school, this is what we would teach. Ready? Classes in critical thinking, dialogue, common sense, and tolerance. What say you, Tom Harris? Wouldn't you love those curricula? Wouldn't that be great?
Yes, exactly. And one of the greatest things to do would be to assign students to debate different sides of issues. You know, talk about the COVID thing, for example.
Sure.
Your job is to defend vaccines. Your job as the opponent is to go against them and show the problems. So it forces students to think outside the box.
As opposed to having a class on how to throw bricks more than you can do a shot put in an Olympic competition. Better training that you don't get training in firebombing, and you don't get training in assaulting people for just them giving their opinion. But again, we're talking what? Are we preaching to the choir? I think we are, but hopefully I think the choir is pretty smart out there in this audience. That's
right. And you know, it is important for us to go to public meetings, especially school board meetings, and stand up to the microphone and say, look, why are you only teaching one side of these issues? There's a massive debate in the climate field, for example, and quite frankly, in the COVID area. So, I mean, we should be holding the teachers to account. Why are you only teaching one point of view? Aren't you trying to teach the students how to think for themselves?
Correct. Well, Tom, we're going to take a momentary movement out to the cosmos here. I promise people on this show that we get what we call the Sky Update, because that's how this radio show started. And then we'll continue to talk on the other side of the hard break about some other fascinating things and continue climate conference that we have here and the information, and also get a little bit into your aviation background, a fascinating story. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is a special night as we find the moon is new, meaning it's invisible to the eye, so the darkest of skies exist. Right now, as we're talking live across this big, vast audience, Talk Radio 77, ladies and gentlemen, the planet Saturn reaches opposition, meaning that it's its best position that it will be for the whole year. So we have clear skies, whether it's East Coast, anywhere you're listening, in nighttime, of course, not daylight. Saturn occupies a position in the sky that's pretty bright in the southeast sky, or maybe south, wherever you live, about a third of the way up. Right now, 794 million miles, and I've rounded that off away. And you know, Tom, it's interesting. The light takes 71 minutes to go there with the speed of light. But, Tom, something amazing to the audience always, and write it down, folks, share it in conversation. The speed of light, 670 million miles an hour. So if you and I jumped on the WABC, flagship Starship, and wanted to go to Saturn at the speed of light, it would still take us 71 minutes, and we could probably, Tom, have a decent dinner in 71 minutes, whether it's fast food or not. And autumn, that beautiful sacred season begins. I love autumn. On the 22nd, 2:19 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, when the sky changes, the sun moves across the equator. Well, Tom, how did I do? Did I do pretty good?
Oh, it was great. And Saturn, even with a small telescope, I have an 8-inch telescope. You see the rings. You see the rings as clear as a bell. I mean,
and right now, those rings are edge on, so people can, barely see them. But, why we do this? Look, taking our minds off of all the things that kind of go, oh, my gosh, I don't want to hear that, or, oh, I'm so tired of all this crazy fighting. What better than looking out into the vast cosmos? Because what? That brings the mysteries, the eternal mysteries for what? As long as humans have been on the planet. And what did Carl Sagan say, Tom? He said this particular planet is the pale blue dot in a vast universe that we still, in our own solar system, have never found replicant anything like the Earth. And that's the whole part and parcel of the show, talking about how to save the planet, but do it in a way, ladies and gentlemen, that's filled with facts and figures, right, Tom Harris? And not going off on an emotional side. Hey, we respect both sides of the equation. And if you're a person listening to this Dr. Sky experience and you disagree, let's see how polished everybody else can be out there in the word of disagreement in the form of trying to have conversation. And maybe we're not asking too much, right? In the form of dialogue with critical thinking. So after that, Tom, go ahead. We've only got about a minute.
Okay, I'll give you a quote from Buzz Aldrin. Okay, I saw Buzz Aldrin speak. I was within 2 feet of him. I could have shook his hand, but he was being mobbed. And he said, we have to have the humility to protect the Earth, but the courage to explore space. He said one of them by themselves is the sound of one hand clapping.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, and he's like in his deep 90s right now, and that's 95. An amazing man. Yeah, we met him a few times at air shows, and he's kind of an interesting guy because he took no nonsense from somebody who actually argued with him in a disrespectful way about him going to the moon. And Buzz Aldrin, I guess he gave him a right uppercut or a left uppercut because the person really got in his space, and I think he assaulted Buzz Aldrin, so... What does a good Navy pilot or Air Force, no, he was Air Force, do? You stand your ground.
I love Buzz Aldrin. He's a wonderful guy.
Tom, we'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, your questions and comments on many of these subjects, 1-800-848-9222. We'll be right back, and we'll talk a little bit about Tom's aviation world experience, too, as we still stay on measure with the whole concept of the International Climate Science Coalition. We'll be right back.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Science without religion is lame, but religion without science is blind. Another quote from some of the great scientists of all time, and that goes to Albert Einstein. 33 minutes after the hour, we continue to hour number 2, the top of the hour. Tom Harris, he's with us, ladies and gentlemen, the executive director, of the International Climate Science Coalition. And just briefly, if I may just shift gears, tell me a little bit about your engineering and aerospace background, because we always love to talk about aviation and aerospace, too. And this one, I think, is pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I did a master's in aeronautical and aerospace engineering, and I was in the Air Force at the time, so they posted me to Cold Lake in northern Alberta, where it gets to minus 45 degrees.
Good name for the place, right?
Yeah, very cold. Even in the summertime, the water in Cold Lake, which is there, hurts to put your feet in. So it was a perfect place for doing cold weather testing. Okay, and our Prime Minister promised the King of Norway, Pierre Trudeau, at that time, that we would fly F-5 fighters, freedom fighters, out of Norway to help them protect, against NATO, or protect NATO against the Soviet Union in those days. But he never checked with his military to see if he could actually do it. And they came to me. I was the engine guy for the F-5, and they said, we want to fly the F-5 out of Norway. Can we do it? I said, well, do they have JP4 fuel, which is high-octane fuel? It's really great.
Bet. And aviation gas, right, to the rest of us.
Yeah.
Right.
And they only had JP5 and JP8. And I said, well, let me talk to the engine manufacturer, which was GE in Lynn, Massachusetts. So I called them up and I said, look, they want to fly it with JP5 and JP8. And they said, well, it's not done. I mean, the engines never run on that. And I said, well, look, the real concern is that when you're at altitude, if you're in a dogfight and one of your engines goes out, they call that stalling, you have to relight that engine really fast. Because if you're in a dogfight, you only got one engine of a 2-engine fighter. You're like shooting ducks out of a pond. Your enemy's going to take you down right away. So you got to relight really fast. So that was the real concern with this higher, much heavier and more viscous fuel, which didn't atomize as well. That's one of the things you do is you atomize it before you put it into the combustion chamber. Would we be able to relight? And
Tom, excuse me to cut you off. You have to move to a different location because we're getting like a solar storm just interfering with the transmission.
Oh, okay. How's it right now?
Yes. You're a little bit better. Keep trying.
Okay, I'll just move over here a little bit. Okay,
please continue, and let's hope we have... Go ahead, sir.
Okay, yeah, so we fueled one side of the aircraft because it had separate fuel tanks for the left and right engine. We fueled one side with JP5 and then later JP8, and we kept, of course, one side working with JP4 because we want to get back to the ground in one piece. And we went to different parts of the flight envelope and simulated as if we were in a dogfight and turned off the engine, pretending that it was stalled. We couldn't relight. Until eventually we had to make modifications to the engine that GE recommended, increasing the ignition energy and various other things, which eventually ended up costing the Canadian taxpayer millions and millions of dollars. But we did finally get it so that the F-5 would be able to relight in a fight. But it cost an absolute fortune, and you'd laugh because the generals in the Canadian Air Force, they wanted to tell the Prime Minister's office what was going on, but they didn't want to tell him that we couldn't do it without spending millions of dollars. So they told me, he said, look, one of the generals called me, and I was just a captain, and he said, look, we want you here this afternoon, and it was 11 in the morning, to brief us, because we're going to have to go tell the Prime Minister that to make his promise come true, it's going to cost another $100 million or something. And I said, well, I'm in northern Alberta right now. How am I going to get there? And they said, well, you've got fighters, haven't you? So I walked down to the flight line and I said to one of the pilots, I said, can you fly me to Ottawa now? And so they did. They put an oxygen mask on me and a helmet and put me in a fighter and flew me there. And I felt like Buzz Lightyear, because I land in the tarmac. I walk 35 yards or something into the meeting room, put my helmet down on the table. The generals are there. I showed them the data. They said, damn, you're right. And bye-bye. And so I got back in the fighter and flew back. So it was fun because I was only about 20. Yeah, I was only about 26 years old, and my dad said, he was an engineer for his whole life, he said, they gave you a project that is way, way beyond what you'd normally see a 26-year-old getting, so, relish it while you've got it.
Well, Tom, that's an interesting story, and really quickly, because I want to get back to the main thing, but I just wanted to introduce that to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, at another time, Tom can explain the story of the Avro Arrow. The Canadian Avro Aircraft Manufacturing Company made a most amazing aircraft. Look it up, folks, in your spare time. The Avro, A-V-R-O, Arrow, way ahead of its time, a most incredible one. It was rolled out, as I'm reading, on October 4th, 1957, the time that the Soviets, of course, sent up the Sputnik. Sad to say it wasn't moved on into production in great numbers, lots of controversy, and canceled by some in the Canadian government. Some allege, and not to say steal your thunder, that was happening in there is that there were also technically 2 alleged spies of the Soviet Union that were named Brick and Lind. That was another reason they may have shut down the whole process, and they burned and got rid of all the molds, all the blueprints, and somebody said that there was an air marshal out there who actually hid one of those airplanes for posterity. Nobody knows if that's a myth or not. More with you, Tom, on those subjects in the future, but that must have been an amazing flight. But here we go. Let's go and talk to the people that are calling in right now, ladies and gentlemen. Let's say good morning to Mark in Manhattan. Mark, good morning. You're on with Tom Harris. How are you?
Yes, hello once again. When I was working at the Goddard Institute for Space Study in New York in the 1960s, I had the privilege of meeting and knowing John Clauser, the 2022 Nobel Prize winner in physics, for his esoteric topic was quantum entanglement. But he was a serious sailor personally, and he owned a large sailboat, and he made 7 transits across the Pacific and back from California. And what he did was tricked out all the sun-exposed surfaces to solar electric cells, solar panels. And he took the precaution of attaching an ammeter, which measures the number of amperes of current that are generated by the solar cells. And he made the amazing discovery in his 7 transits that every time he went under a cloud bank, the generation of electricity power in those solar cells dropped by 50%.
Wow.
Incredible.
Now, what he pointed out was that this was a direct result of the famous albedo effect. The albedo effect tells about how cloud banks reflect sunlight and its heat energy from the surrounding atmosphere of the Earth back into space. Right. And it acts as a moderating effect, and there are always cloud banks somewhere on the planet in daylight. So
hey, Mark, let me just mention something to you, and I think you'd appreciate this. The albedo effect is most simply demonstrated by Venus, and is what we were talking about with Tom about temperatures. And for the audience out there that may not understand albedo, it's not a gentleman named Al with the last name Beto. It simply means this: the amount of light that's received to the percentage that's reflected back. So that's why, Mark, you probably know that, but maybe people don't know. It's the percentage received to the amount of percentage reflected. And Venus is covered in clouds, so it has a very high albedo. But please continue.
And John Clauser, as a result, 7 times he did the experiments with the same results. And his conclusion was that the natural effect of albedo, he examined something like 104 models of climate warming and found that all of them were defective to a large degree because they didn't take that into effect in the programming significantly enough, and it dwarfs by many, many orders of magnitude all the heat effect that human beings on Earth could produce.
Right, exactly.
You said a lot there, Mark.
Yeah. Yes, well, that means that all the models that the climate warming fanatics are talking about, they're based on imperfect models that do not take into account realistic Earth conditions in the atmosphere. And he has challenged people left and right to debate it, and they run from him for the simple reason they say, oh, this was not his area of physics. He wanted for quantum entanglement. Well, that's a much harder subject of physics than climate science.
And Mark, you're so right. The whole concept of quantum, the whole thing of quantum entanglement is still not totally understood, and that's for another subject. But go ahead, Tom, and sorry, Mark, believe me, I love your commentary. You bring insightful things, but we got a big full board here and want to try to get everybody on. Tom, your response.
Yeah, for sure. John Clauser is a genius, of course, and when he got his Nobel Prize, he used the opportunity to actually talk about the fact that the climate scare doesn't make any sense. And I heard that he actually talked to Joe Biden when he was invited to the White House after his Nobel Prize, and he tried to tell Joe Biden that the whole climate scare was a mistake and it was based on incomplete science, and apparently Biden just dismissed him. Now, this is a guy who won the Nobel Prize in physics, and you have the president of the president of the U.S. telling him he's not right. So John Clauser is an amazing guy. He works with the CO2 Coalition quite a lot, and he's a brave man. Unlike a lot of scientists, he is prepared to speak out. So I really appreciate him.
Well, thank you. We're up against the clock, Mark. Thank you so much, and I wish we had more time to get into these subjects. When we do talk more about the quantum side, again, I appreciate you to call back and be part of this conversation. Thank you for being with us, and hope you have a great Sunday morning. We're almost up against that break, and we're going to do our very best, ladies and gentlemen, to move it through time and space here, as I should say correctly, and try to get as many people that are still on hold there. And why don't we do that? Let's take that break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back more with Tom Harris and try to get as many of you on with your comments and opinions on the Dr. Sky Experience.
The Dr. Sky Experience on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Dr. Sky Experience. Entertaining and informative on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
47 minutes after the hour, let's continue with the callers. Let's say good morning to Anthony in Long Island. Good morning, Anthony. How are you? And thanks for your patience.
Oh, thank you for the in-depth topics you cover. I would like to bring to your attention Dr. Deborah Birx, Fauci's queen, has now joined the Palantir Federal Advisory Board, PFOB, as a senior official with regard to Palantir Apollo, Palantir Gotham, Palantir Foundry, and these are basically an arm of the Pentagon, which now if writers and journalists write about the Pentagon, it has to meet the approval of the Department of War, and if they scrub it, you will find yourself no longer a journalist or able to report or submit articles pertaining to anything to do with the military. And my point is here you have the usual suspect. Deborah Birx is now within in quantum physics, quantum computers. They're setting up an entire quantum grid of, and it's. I mean, the amount of fresh water and the heat that's generated and the amount of electricity that's consumed for a quantum computer grid is what they're speaking. I mean, Governor Hochul just gave $500 million to Stony Brook University for just this.
Yes. And you're right, Anthony. We talk about that with Patrick Wood, who talks more about transhumanism and the whole concept of what we'll get into in the month of October with him. But you're right. Look at all the energy it takes, power that people need. I mean, how are you going to sustain all this, right? Tom, this is crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, and in fact, it might end up killing the climate scare because they're going to need so much power, and they're not going to get it from wind and solar. One of the things that's interesting is you're seeing some of these AI companies are actually buying nuclear reactors. Okay, so I mean, the environmental group, they hate nuclear reactors even more than they hate fossil fuels. So I think that a lot of this will be driven by the need for reliable power for AI and all this quantum computing stuff. The quantum computing stuff is really interesting because if you study it a bit, you realize that we have an opportunity once we have that ability to actually program things in quantum computers. We might finally be able to develop computer models that actually do work. Because right now, if you try to, model the atmosphere with a modern computer, it would take longer for the computer model to run than it would for nature to unfold. In other words, if you want to forecast the climate in 10 years and you bring in all the variables that you need and you have a small enough grid, across the Earth's atmosphere, it takes more than 10 years to run the model. So quantum computing might finally give us the opportunity to really predict climate properly.
Anthony, you bring up some good points. Really quickly, your closing comment, because we got to move forward. Sorry to make it.
Yes. The point I was trying to make, though, is that, President Eisenhower's farewell address warned us against the congressional military complex.
Right.
And what Palantir is doing is creating a grid of total autonomous control over the entire global infrastructure of the world. And they're using fresh water, drinkable water. You can't use salt water to cool these computers. And we already have melted down nuclear reactors that are heating the planet up exponentially. And when you consider the fact that all these reactors sit on the waterfront, so as the water rises, now it sets a whole host of other problems with regard to nuclear power and ultimately what they're using these technologies for. They're aiming at us.
Anthony, thank you. I hate to cut you short. You bring up some very good points. Stay tuned in future iterations. We'll be talking with Patrick Wood on that very subject of technocracy and transhumanism. Thank you for being with us. Hope you have a great Sunday. Let's say quickly good morning to Greg in Connecticut. You've been patient. Your questions, comments, or observations?
Yeah, this is really a wonderful show. It's my kind of show. You know, you talk about global warming, celestial collisions, ball lightning, tooth decay, remote viewing, you know, but maybe we could, take a step back and everybody go out and look at the sky and start dancing under the stars while we still can see them.
Boy, do I like that guy. There you go. That wasn't even a funny man. That was a good guy who brought up some good points. There you go.
Yeah, Dr. Sky, I got to tell you one thing. Right now, the photons that are hitting my eye have traveled for 2 million years. Mm-hmm. I'm looking at a little smudge in the sky that is the Andromeda Galaxy, which is, of course, the largest and nearest spiral galaxy to ours. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, the sky gives us a perspective that you just don't get on the Earth. So, I mean,
that's right. Open our minds to the mysteries of the universe. I mean, where do you hear this kind of stuff? And not to me being, stand on a soapbox here. There's others that do just as good a job, I'm sure. But, ladies and gentlemen, a reprieve from some of the things that may give us an ouch or a pain during the week and open our minds. Let's say good morning to Christine in Manhattan. She's been patiently awaiting an observation or a comment or a question. You're on the air.
Hi, Dr. Sky. Thank you. Your show is fascinating, and you made a comment a little while ago, and so have several other people, about the peace and beauty of looking into the cosmos to get away from the nuttiness. And it reminded me of an ancient Irish saying, and I put it in my Christmas cards. And I remember a time when I was a little kid, when I looked up the frozen winter sky when I was with my parents and saw that beauty. And the Irish saying is, may the peace of the shining stars be with you.
Wow, that's powerful. And that's a nice way to almost end the show, don't you think, Tom? I mean, Christine, no, that's beautiful because it's, again, I mean, I got involved in this when I was very young. Good parents, God bless them. And everybody out there, think of the time, ladies and gentlemen, and Christine, you've testified here. Think of the time when you were out at the darkest location at night and you heard, let's say, crickets, or you didn't hear anything, and you just looked out there and you just wondered and says, wow, how small we are, how big the universe is, and how little we really know. And why the heck, Christine, can't we all just get along, right? That's the whole point, right?
Yeah, people got to look outside right now because Orion is rising, and you can see almost all of it right now, and it's beautiful. With the the 3 stars in the belt, and the sword with the nebula down there. I mean, it's just awesome.
Sure, and you go to those 3 stars, Alnitak, Alnilam, Mintaka, and as Tom is describing, just a little below the middle star, you find the M42, the Orion Nebula, and this is the greatest time, folks, because there's no moon out, and if you have clear skies, don't do this while you're listening to the show, but maybe you do. And imagine, Tom, how many people would be listening to the show outside, but I don't recommend it for you unless you like temperatures now. What's your temperature?
Well, 30? It's now down to about 3, and by the time I'm home, it'll be 1. But the sky's beautiful right now. You got, the Great Square of Pegasus and Andromeda. And
listen to him,
You can see the Andromeda Galaxy. I mean, people don't realize that, the Andromeda Galaxy is visible to the naked eye. It's about 50% bigger than ours. And because it's 2 million light years away, or 2.2 million, I'm not sure, it means the light has been traveling for 2 million years to hit my eyeball.
That's amazing. See, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Harris is not just one-dimensional. He's just amazing. And we appreciate that to add to the beauty. Christine, you get the last word. We only got a few minutes, but everybody who comes on has a chance to get the last word. But that's not the nice way to say it. They get the next word. Christine?
Well, Thank you. And when you hear about the speed of light and 2 million years to hit his eyeball, that is why I don't believe that space creatures can travel to space.
Well, just think about it this way, Christine. As I said before, and I'm not the one who's the expert, but just one who repeats what I hope is clarity, 670 million miles an hour is the speed of light. And that is faster than anybody's motorcycle or Tesla Plaid, right, Tom, or any other that they might have. And yet, what we were hearing before from other great guests like Mark and great callers, the quantum entanglement is basically somehow you could go from one edge of the Milky Way instead of, let's say, it's 100,000 years, 100,000 light years, 100,000 years at the speed of light. Somehow you could do that instantaneously. Christine, we have to say good morning to you, and sorry we can't carry on the conversation. Would it be nice to do 23 hours straight, Tom? Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah. You remember what Einstein called that idea? He called it spooky interaction at a distance.
Wow. I like you more, Tom Harris.
He didn't believe it at first, but it does appear to be working, quantum entanglement. And, this whole idea that things that are somehow entangled can interact with each other across light years instantly. Wow, we've got a lot to learn in physics.
Well, folks, if we haven't gotten to you in this iteration of the Dr. Sky Experience, we do apologize here because the clock rules, and I hope you're enjoying the program here, Christine, and everybody else who's called throughout the 2 hours. Again, just to reiterate here, Tom Harris, what is your website so people can follow up with you and hopefully have continued dialogue?
Yeah, sure. It's icsc-climate.com, and if you go there, you can click on About Us, and you can email me directly. I'd be happy to address all your questions.
I appreciate you, Tom, and we'll certainly be looking forward to scheduling you as you're convenient, at your convenience, I should say, and bring you. And ladies and gentlemen, like I said, no apology. If you disagree, that's what we can do. We can have a dialogue. And Tom, really quickly, in maybe less than a minute, what's the solution to trying to do this, to be able to have maybe open conversations so we can agree to disagree and not so throw bricks and blow things up and cause bodily harm and other horrible things? Well, what's your quick solution if there is one?
Well, I think two things. One is we've got to get to the schools. Okay, we've got to go to parent-teacher night. We've got to go to the school board and insist that they teach critical thinking and that they teach people to look at both sides of issues. That is a very critical one. We also have to stop attaching our ego to our opinion. Okay, if you defeat my opinion, you haven't defeated me. It's my
tell
opinion.
That to people who depend so much on social media, thinking they have thousands and thousands of friends. And if you were in dire straits, how many of them would give you $1 if you needed something in your life?
Yeah.
And not to be negative, maybe it's a little too much emphasis on the social media platforms, and as important as they can be. Tom Harris, I hate to cut you short. The clock rules. That's something even Einstein couldn't change at this point in time as we move through time and space. Always a pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, we do appreciate every one of you out there who's listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. Next week, some very interesting guests as always. We'll be informing you as time goes on. Dr. Peter Solomon, 100 Years to Extinction, the Tyranny of Technology and the Fight for a Better Future. And now we pass the torch of knowledge and dialogue on to T.J. McCormick for the other side of midnight as he takes you to the break of dawn. Thank you so much to Tony and Bill. Peace, health, happiness, and clear skies. Take advantage of the beauty of the wonders of the universe. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Dr. Sky Experience. You can hear the Dr. Sky Experience Saturday mornings, midnight to 2 a.m. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder, what the heck is going on here?
This is the story of the one. As a custodial supervisor at a high school, he knows that during cold and flu season, germs spread fast. It's why he partners with Grainger to stay fully stocked on the products and supplies he needs, from tissues to disinfectants to floor scrubbers. All so that he can help students, staff, and teachers stay healthy and focused. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.